Hey guys, welcome to another day with Slick, or better you. Did you know offhand that when you have a popular ism in your town where you see two merchandisers, maybe two people that look like this that are twins, it might confuse some people, but if you see one and two that are not twins, then you know. And that's kind of speaking in terms of my guest who's coming on today, who ironically played twins on the same show, played a villain doctor, played a businessman who ended up getting killed in General City, a doctor, a karaoke, a whole lot. And I'm thrilled to have him come on today. Before I introduce my guest, here is a video promo clip featuring that particular guest. Here we go.
Imagine you're Nick McHenry. One woman has stolen your heart. Another is out to steal your identity. They both want to claim you any way they can. But to belong to one means denying another. What would you do? What will he do? Guiding Light.
Try me.
Weekdays.
And that, sir, is our guest coming on, Mr. Vincent Irizarry. And here he is right now. Let me get him aboard. Hey, Vince.
Hey,
How you doing today?
I'm not hearing you, man.
Oh,
I'm
man.
not hearing you at all. I don't
Oh,
hear any
man.
audio right now.
Oh,
I don't know why, because I just heard the commercial that you had. I could hear that, but I'm not hearing you.
oh. Well, I don't have. Wait a minute. Let me see something here. Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I don't hear anything from you, man.
Oh,
I take
man.
the earplugs out. Maybe it's that, but no.
Can you hear
And
me
my
now?
audio's up.
Yep, my audio is up too.
Wow. Okay.
Hmm.
I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm
Hold
having a
on one
hard time
second.
with this. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Now we're in business.
Yeah. What was that? Do you know what it was?
I'm not sure. I played around with the audio button down here. Maybe it was that because,
Okay.
yeah. But how you doing today, though?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another beautiful sunny day here in Southern California. It's going to be high 70s today. Crazy.
Lucky you.
Yeah,
Down here.
February.
Yeah. Down here in Baltimore, we got hit with some freezing rain last week, really hard, and then today it was some flurries. But I want to come down there in the sun. I'm kind of tired of the snow.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of the reasons why when I moved here, I stayed here because I'm kind of tired of the winters back east. As much as I love back east, the winters and the humidity in the summer, it's a little tough sometimes. So, yeah, it's quality of life.
Yeah. So before we start, like I asked all my guests, how have you and your family been doing during this pandemic?
We're doing okay. Everybody's, several of us have gotten COVID. I got it at the end of the year. I did get it. My youngest sister did. My brother-in-law did. I have nieces and nephews who have, and my brother, the other people in my family have had it throughout the past year, but everybody's recovered fairly well. We've all done well. Thankfully, my parents haven't gotten it. They both got their first shot just recently in Florida, Naples. I mean, they're in their 80s. So obviously they're in a high risk category. So they recently got the first. They got it first. And my older brother, he's 65, so he was able to get it as well. So we're faring well. I mean, it's been a tough time for everybody. It's been really crazy. I can't believe that literally we're 3 weeks away from being an entire year. March 15th, the Ides of March. Ironically, it's when they announced that we're shutting everything down. So it's been a year. It's been crazy. So holding on,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is, even though that happened, is ironically, y'all still, y'all here. Y'all you woke up this morning, and
Yeah.
Ironically, hopefully, it can get to a point where hopefully things can get better and go back to the way they were and not
We
still
hope.
be the same.
Yeah, I can't, it's kind of hard to accept that this is so-called the new normal. I can't imagine this is how we're going to live our lives forever, So I'm just hoping that we do get some sense of normalcy of what it was like before, where people can be more socially interactive. Kids get back to school, that's tough. I gratefully, my youngest son is in college. He's at university at the Citadel,
Right.
and he's going to school. He's there at the school itself in South Carolina. But I can only imagine, as a parent, having young children and not having them have the in-person learning and having the social interaction with other students at this time. It's a developmental period of their lives. And I certainly, for their well-being, I can imagine as a parent, I'd be really concerned that for a whole year now that they haven't been able to do that. That's very disturbing and very upsetting. So
yeah,
it's important. Social development is as important as, intellectual development. So that's really tough for them. I can imagine for families. So.
Yeah, it's ironic. I had a coworker who we was talking about this the other day, and he said, people don't forget things like 9/11 or World War II. A lot of things like that happened, and this is definitely something that a lot of people won't forget. Like this is something that changed everybody's lives. We're all walking around with masks now, social distance, and
I know
people have passed away. A lot of people have left here as a result of that.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate in that regard, especially from having had the illness. It didn't hit me hard. It wasn't as bad for me. And my brother-in-law, we both got it at the same time, and he was the same way. And I know that there are people that have really struggled with it and have had long-term after effects, from it physically, and I haven't at all. It was, for me, it was almost like a lingering cold. I had a cough, and I did feel one day I felt really fatigued. And never got a fever over 100. So I was very grateful that I physically was able to endure it on a much better level than a lot of other people. And I know that it's been really hard for some people, to the point where some obviously didn't even survive it. So I feel very grateful for that.
Right. Well, Vince, I gotta tell you, man, kind of went off that one. I've been a fan of your work for a long time. When I first watched soaps, it was in 2000. I got hooked on All My Children in 2002.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about Nick McHenry, Lujack, none of that, because you was this devious David Hayward. He was one heck of a character.
World-renowned cardiologist.
the first episode I saw you in, now, mind you, Marge Ducey, I didn't know it was Alexandra. She was Vanessa on All My Children. The first time I got hooked on the show, remember when Leo left the show and they fell off the bridge? Yeah. You was there. That was my intro to the show. I was like, oh my gosh.
Josh Duvel. Yeah.
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 There was great storylines. It was fun. And working with Josh and working with Marge, working with Rebecca Buddig. We all worked very close at that time. Finola Hughes, obviously.
Yeah.
It was a really good storyline, and it was one of the great things about working in daytime. It feels like it's one big ensemble, cast. It's like a repertory company,
Yeah.
Where a lot of people work together again and again and again in different capacities, different shows. It just has always felt like that. I've been in that medium for almost 40 years now. So,
and you still look good.
Well, thanks. Hopefully the lighting is good, and I try to make sure that I go places where the lighting is complimentary. I stay away from those where it's not. That's all.
Yeah. So let's take it way back though. Before we get into the daytime meeting with you, where are you from, and when did you know growing up that acting was something you wanted to get into?
Actually, I was born in Queens, New York. I grew up there, lived there till I was 8 years old, and moved out to Long Island, my family. To Lake Grove, Lake Ronkonkoma area. I went to school at Sachem High School. I was going to school at Berklee College of Music, and I had a teacher, an English teacher there, Ryland Brenner was his name, is his name. And he had a theater company in Boston that he called the Pumpernickel Players. I don't know why that was called that, but I'm sure he explained it to me at the time. I just don't remember. It was so many years ago. Yeah, that was like, man, honestly, it was like almost 45 years ago. Yeah. And he asked me, I became friends with him. He was a post-beat poet, and I was writing poetry at the time. I became good friends with him, and we'd go out for drinks and stuff and hang out with him, with several other people, other students. And he asked me if I had ever thought about acting. And it was the kind of thing, I always loved movies. I always loved it. I grew up as a kid with my older brother, Frankie. Mm-hmm. He and I would sneak downstairs at at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning when my parents were sleeping, and we would sit in front of the TV, like right in front with the volume down. Right. We'd watch like the Late Show and the Late Show till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, watching Jimmy Cagney movies and mm-hmm. Cary Grant, Clark Gable, all these movies that were fun. Jimmy Stewart. So I always had a fascination about acting. It was a great art form. I loved it. And when he asked me this, he said, "Have you ever thought about it?" I said, "It's one of those things I've certainly considered, but never got off my backside to do anything about it." I mean, I was 17 at the time. Right. 18. So he had a play that he wanted me to read for one of the leads in a play called Death Watch. It was a Jean Genet play. It was a one-act play, but it was very intense. And my character totally loses on stage. And it's 3 guys in the jail cell, and my character winds up killing one of the other characters. And it was very intense role. Wow. So I took the play home for Christmas for holiday break. And I didn't know how to prepare it. I literally acted out every part, and up in my bedroom. And my parents probably thought I was crazy because they could hear me screaming at myself upstairs. I'm serious. They didn't know. They were like, "What are you doing?" I'm working on a play. I might consider this. You're on the road. You're on the road to success. That's what you're doing. Yeah, and I was just familiarizing myself with the whole play, with every role and everything. And I literally knew the entire play, everybody's lines, backwards and forwards. So I went back to Boston after the break, auditioned for Ryland, and he cast me in it. And I fell in love with the process. It was just really exciting. And I would do the same thing, rehearse by myself, but on the rooftop on the corner of Mass Ave and Boylston Avenue in Boston. Right. There was a bank that was right next door to the dormitories of Berklee College of Music where I was going, and you could climb out a window from somebody's room onto the roof. Mm-hmm. And I would rehearse the play by myself on that rooftop in the middle of Boston. And people in apartment buildings could probably see me out there and probably think of the same thing my parents like, "What kind of crazy I do?" Because I was acting out the entire play. I had no idea how to approach it. That's the way that I decided to do it. But I was really kind of very antisocial at the time, I guess. I mean, I was very withdrawn. I think it was because from studying piano so much, I'd literally be in a room sometimes, a piano practice room for like 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, right, by myself. And when I left, I felt like disconnected with people. And and acting, especially this kind of a role, which was so intense and so emotional, it was really, it was like an epiphany for me. It opened up a whole new world of expression, and right, that I can open myself up emotionally in front of an audience of people. And to that degree, I found fascinating. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with acting from that point on, and started doing other plays around Boston. Then left Boston and came to New York, I actually withdrew from music college after the second year and decided to pursue acting. It was kind of a lateral move because there's no guarantee with acting any more than with music, that you can have any success in it. I mean, yeah, I think one step down would have been trying to make a living as a poet, I think that's really tough. So anyway, that's what I did. That's when I fell in love with acting, and I went to New York and started pursuing it there, and did theater for about 5-6 years before I landed my first TV job, which was Guiding Light. I did plays off Broadway, and played John Lennon. I'm not sure, Paul McCartney in a play about John Lennon called Lennon. Did that. I did other plays around it. Did Indian Wants the Bronx. It's an Israel Horowitz play. And I was seen by a teacher, a professional teacher at the Strasberg Institute, Lee Strasberg. And she invited me into her class, Elaine Aiken. And from that, I got a scholarship with Lee Strasberg and Anna Strasberg. And my career and they're the ones that introduced me to my agents that I had for like 9 years. I was doing a play with a theater company called the Classical Theater Ensemble, and I was the lead in it, called Everyman at St. John the Divine. It was a big pageantry and really another powerful play and character to perform. And that's when I got my agent. So that's when I started working professionally and got Guiding Light. Yeah.
Got the role that changed your life. You know, you played this character Lujack, who was like you was like another Fonzie in a way. You know, you had the leather jacket, this bad boy, and you was a part of the group, the Galahans. Interesting title.
The Galahans, yeah. Well, I would say that it's kind of interesting because you could look back at those early scenes, and the costume designer, he was inspired by the Michael Jackson Beat It video. Okay?
Wow.
So that's why we were wearing, suspenders, and fedoras and like these clothes that was trying to be cool and colorful, but actually we looked pretty bad for a gang. We were kind of like we weren't that scary as a gang, frankly. I thought we looked kind of silly, but that's in retrospect. And it was tough because then you'd see like movies that came out at the time of real gangs. And I'm like, and that's what a gang is, It's like the California kind of with me and everything. But the characters were fun, though. They were great characters, and I loved it. I loved the character, and I loved playing Lujack. It was very exciting for me. And it did change my life. I was living in a rooming house at the time when I got the part. I had a room. I was a boarder in a rooming house in Greenwich Village. But I was on the 5th floor. And if you know Greenwich Village, most of the buildings are like 3-story, 4 stories. I was on the 5th. So I could see over all the rooftops and see the Twin Towers were right in front of my window from 11th Street. And I shared a kitchen and bathroom with 6 other boarders in that hall, in that wing. So it definitely changed my life. Yeah. So it was exciting.
You got a lot of fans on here that is just in love to see you right now. They love Lujack. They love the one fan named Karen loves you. And
thank you, Karen.
One fan, Allison, said the long hair is what she remembers.
Yes, I definitely had long hair. And even as Nick, actually, I think Nick, I had longer hair.
Yeah.
Than I did as Lujack. I totally forgot that. And every once in a while, I'd see something like a clip from the Nick days. I was like, wow, my hair was really long. Even in that commercial, I think it looked like it was pretty long. But
yeah. I got an episode I got some on DVD with you as Nick, and there's some with you with it in a ponytail.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you have a ponytail at different times. Yeah.
So, was it ironic that when you was playing Lujack, of course, when they paired you with Beth, Judy Evans, because everybody knew Beth with Philip for many years on the show, and then they added you to the mix. And, because originally it was Beth, Phillip, Mindy, and Rick. And then you came aboard and they did the triangle with you guys. I mean, what are your memories of Judy and Grant during them days? And I know John Bojo took over as Phillip later on as well.
Right. That's right. Well, I loved working with Judy. We had a great connection together. And John and her then boyfriend, John Weitzel. He was the director on the show, and he was an excellent director. We had great directors. I mean, Bruce Barry was wonderful. Joanne Sedgwick was wonderful. They really were. We had excellent production staff and crew and writers. I mean, Pam Long, she did such a brilliant job with the developing of that show while I was on it at the time. I loved it. I loved reading the lines from all the writers at that period.
Right.
But yeah, with Judy, it was very special. I knew it was an uphill battle because the fans really loved Beth and Phillip. And I've always said this, that if social media was around at the time, I don't know if my character would have survived, because I'm serious. Because it takes time for a character to develop. It takes time for an audience to come to know who that character is. And
Right.
I think that a lot of fans do the show and themselves a disservice by being so quick to criticize and go after new characters.
Right.
They need to give them some chance to breathe and to see who they are, to develop and find out why they are the way they are. And when I first came on as Lujack, I was an antagonist with my gang, harassing the super couple of the time was Beth and Philip. And so I was stepping in between that, and also, harassing people like the Mindy character and the Rick character and everybody,
Yeah.
which the audience loved all of those characters. So my character was not probably very much liked in the beginning. It took time for the audience to see that he was more than just that.
Right.
And especially once they brought on Beverly McKenzie, and it created the character, the relationship between the mother and the son, who believed that he was abandoned as a child by her. That was another really important character development part. Only because when you think about it, it's like it shows the vulnerability of the character. Once the audience starts to see the vulnerability, the real person underneath all of it, they start to understand why they are the way they are. And I was very fortunate to have great characters like that. That character was like that. David Hayward was like that. But again, not in the beginning. And I saw that was a problem, because the audience didn't know why David was the way that he was. So that's when they brought on Marge Doucet to play my mother in that role too. Oddly enough, that she came on to do that, and she was brilliant. And as Vanessa, she was absolutely brilliant. As she was with the replacing Beverly McKenzie as Alexandra. I mean, that's a Herculean task to replace somebody, an icon like Beverly McKenzie, and for the audience to go with it. And they couldn't have done a better job in recasting that character with Marge. She was absolutely brilliant in both roles. I feel very fortunate to have had fantastic, brilliant, maternal characters playing opposite me over the years, and actresses that were just spectacular all the way.
Yeah, because Beverly was fire. My mother loved Beverly as Alexandra, was a huge fan, and I remember reading and hearing about comments about how after she left the show in '92, that obviously roles like that is hard to replace. A lot of that is hard to replace, and that's probably why it took them a while to find. And Marge playing Alex afterwards she did outstanding job. She brought it, made the role her own, and it's really ironic that you both played mother and son on two different shows, on God and Life first, then on My Children.
Yeah, I know, it's true. It's true, and it's interesting too that I played these roles where the son and the mother are in major conflict with each other. Right. I have a wonderful relationship with my real mother, by the way. It's not like it's like the life being imitated by art. It's not like that. Oh, I love my mother, and she's fantastic.
Praise the Lord on that one.
Yeah, she really is. I mean, I look at my own parents. They eloped at 15 years old, and they had me at 21. I was their third child at 21 years old, and
wow.
For me, that was another epiphany, because it dawned on me when I turned 21 that I wasn't mature enough to raise a dog, honestly. And they had 3 children already, and I mean, it was crazy. By the time I had my first child, I was 30. They already had 6 kids, and they're still together today. They're in early 82, 83 years old. So it's pretty wild, to have had a family like that. We're very close in the family, that's for sure.
So I'm going to try to play this clip. I got a clip with you and Beverly right here. I'm going to see if I can pull it up.
Spent 16 years searching for him. Don't you understand? Your mother didn't walk out on you. I'm your mother. I'm your mother. And I've finally found you. Finally found you. Nothing will keep us apart. Nothing will keep us apart. Ever can. Ever can.
So that was when, you found out she was your mother for the first time.
I think when I acknowledged it, I mean, she was telling me that she was my mother for quite a while, and I wouldn't accept her,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's so long ago. I'm trying to remember. And I know that Nick was that was an entire year of Nick not accepting that she was his real biological mother. That's, he didn't believe her at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he actually turned out that his adopted parents lied to him his whole life.
Right.
And gave him the impression that that the McKenzies were my parents. But I was actually stolen from Alexandra.
Yeah.
From my father,
Mm-hmm.
Eric Luvanacek, the concert pianist who couldn't afford 2 children, so gave one of them away.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
I found it interesting when watching the episodes when I do. Now, when you was Lujack, Mindy didn't really like Lujack. You kind of messed with her a bit. When you came out against Nick, I mean, I know at this point Kimberly Simmons was Mindy.
Right.
You ended up being a couple. I mean, what is your memories of working with Kimberly and Krista and then Barbara Crampton and Hamilton, all your Mindys?
Yeah, all the Mindys. Yeah, a basket full of Mindys. Yeah, I mean, the story was great back then too. With Kimberly, we definitely hit it off. The characters were very strong. We were a major couple on the show at the time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she left after a year, and then we went for several months without a Mindy because the character had taken off. Alexandra had scared her away, apparently, if I remember correctly. And then Ann Hamilton came in, but that was very short-lived. She was only in for like 13 weeks, and then was replaced by Barbara Crampton. And she was on it for another few years after that. I don't remember how many years. I think she left before I did.
Yeah, she left in 95, and then you left the following year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I had a lot of Mindys. And Krista Tessa was the first Mindy that I worked with, and she was wonderful. She was great. The characters definitely were not close, not friends, but she was wonderful. I loved working with her. All of them. They're all great in their own ways.
So when you left, when you first left, got in '85, and then they killed off Lujack in the explosion, and then you went to Santa Barbara. Now we talked about this before. I think that and a few other shows were the only show I didn't watch. I don't know much about Santa Barbara. I know Justin Dietz was on there before playing Buzz Cooper, ironically.
Right.
But you played a character named Scott Clark.
Scott Clark, yes.
Yeah. What is your memories of that character and working on that show? I know that show always won a lot of Daytime Emmy Awards with Marcy Walker and A. Martinez.
Right. And Best Show. We won. We were winning Best Show like several years in a row. And it was kind of an interesting thing. It was this Santa Barbara was different from all the other soaps, and that it was the first show to kind of tongue-in-cheek make fun of itself, of soaps, but in a creative way, but it was interesting that, first of all, it was hugely successful in Europe and around the world. It was, for New World at the time, it was making so much money overseas. It was the number one show in France, in Paris, in France.
Right.
And I actually even went, because when I did Lucky Chances, the Jackie Collins movie, NBC sent me to Cannes for, I think it was MIPCOM or MIPFED. It's a TV market, similar to Cannes Film Festival, which is for films. This is for TV. They sent me there to help sell the show internationally to all different markets around the globe.
Right.
And while I was there, Telepoche is their TV guide. It's the #1 distributed magazine in France. They found out I was going to be in the south of France, and they invited me to come up for a week to Paris, and they put me up at Paris at the Le Bristol Hotel suite that was like $1,500 a night suite, and they gave me a 24-hour a day driver where I just had to pick up the phone, and they got to be there in 10 minutes, take me anywhere I want to go. And all they wanted to do was just interview me and do one day of photos of walking around Paris at different places. And I was like, sure. It was that popular. The show was that huge in France that they went out of their way to just have me be entertained so that they can photograph it. It was crazy. It was crazy. But the ironic thing is, it didn't take off in the United States. It was like a darling of the industry. People in the industry loved the show.
Right.
But for some reason in Middle America and other parts of the country, it just never really took off. So that's why it wasn't a long-lasting show. But meanwhile, every year, like for 3 years in a row, I think they won best show. It was very special. Yeah, and that was my first time working with Justin. Justin is he's a powerhouse, man, when it comes to working. He's pretty amazing. Very exciting to work with.
So I should have asked you this question before. So when you was on Guiding Light first, Gail Coley was producer, right?
Right. Yes.
When you went back, was Farron Phelps in, or was Robert Calhoun still producing? I know he left the same year you joined.
It's an interesting story. Robert Calhoun's the one that pursued me for over a year to come back onto Guiding Light. It was right after I finished doing Lucky Chances. He was reaching out to me. And we got together for lunch in Los Angeles. I went back to New York at one point, and he knew I was going to be there. He's like, let's get together. And I got together for drinks with him and with John Riley, I think his name was. He was a head writer. At the time, he used to be a head writer on Days of Our Lives, and then did Passions. Because he was writing at the time with Bob Calhoun. And they were the ones, and it took over a year for us to finally bring the character on. Because at first I said, let me just give him some time. I'm not sure if this is the time for me to come back.
Right.
And then when I did decide, it took months for them to develop a story of the character, and I would have conference calls with some of the writers to talk about with the storyline, what they were going to do. And obviously I wasn't coming back as Lujack. I was coming back as my twin brother. But the ironic thing is, again, that's bizarre, is that after all the time of working with Bob Calhoun to bring the character back, he left the show the week before I started.
Wow.
And I literally called. I said, "Are you serious? all this getting together and developing? Because it's the time for me to leave." And my first day on the show was Jill Farron Phelps' first day on the show. So, and I had worked with her obviously on Santa Barbara.
Right.
So it was just like, again, that whole repertory company thing, big ensemble cast. That's kind of what it feels like all the time. So that's when I came back on, and she was on for a couple of years, and then it was Michael Laibson. I remember it may have been somebody in between, but there were a lot of head writer changes in the 5 years that I was Nick.
Right.
And I that was the hardest part for me, because I felt like every time a new head writer came on, it just felt like they were losing sight of the character a little bit more every time. And it was just hard to watch and be a part of that. So I don't know. So that's always time to leave at that point. At some point, I felt like the character had totally been lost by the end. So.
Yeah, because when you first came back, they had you in a lot of big stories. You was kind of front and center, and then toward the end of your time leaving, they increased the cast a bit, and you kind of faded to the back a bit. And the last thing they had you doing was you left with Susan, the character Susan.
Right, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. And Susan had AIDS, if I remember correctly. That we were going to go off together, and we got married, and we did come back for some Christmas shows, like 8 months later, or a year later, or something like that.
Yeah,
it was probably more like 8 months later. Yeah.
What is your memories of working with? Because after you came back, they went into Nick's past to break up Nick and Mindy, Roger and Alex, and they brought on Eve. Miss Hillary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to. It's hard to remember all the stories and everything. I remember working with Hillary. She was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember much. I do remember something that I was a field correspondent in a war somewhere, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Right.
And that's where I knew her, right? And wasn't I being held captive somewhere?
Yeah.
As a journalist.
Yeah, you had a friend named Paul who was dating her, and then he
Right.
left, and then you two kind of got together when Mindy left, and then they later made Eve kind of crazy.
Yeah. She kind of lost it. I remember at the time. I don't know. Yeah, she became very possessive of Nick, and she was competing, I guess, with Mindy over Nick. I think, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
you had kind of a love triangle there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But then she started doing like crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of hand that rocks the cradle type crazy stuff. I think it was probably inspired by like a Rebecca De Mornay type character of that time, the 80s and 90s. Yeah, so I think that's what I remember. So.
Yeah. And one other thing I remember too at that time when you joined, I talked with Mark Dorwin, who was AC Mallet, about this storyline. Y'all did this. Remember Hamp's bachelor party in '92, where it was all the men and y'all played football. It was you,
yes,
Jerry Badorn, Peter Simon, Frank Mallet, and Hamp.
Yeah, I remember that. That was not my favorite stuff. It was kind of strange because then it was revealed that Nick had PTSD from the war or something like that, and it seemed like it was a kind of forced story at the time. It didn't really make sense given what the character had gone through already on the show and without any signs of that. I mean, that's the hardest part. I think the hardest but also most interesting part of working on a character in daytime is because it's always you have a beginning and you have a very long, hopefully middle of the character, and then potentially an end at some point. But in the middle, it's like all of a sudden you're being reprogrammed. It's almost like they have like a data chip in the back of your cerebral part of the brain,
right?
They like put something in there. All of a sudden now you have a brother you didn't know you had, okay? Or now you have PTSD that you didn't know that you had, and it's like this, and also you have to go with it. Obviously that's your job as an actor, but it is a little strange at times. And that was one of those moments where I felt it was very strange. I'm like, this seems forced. It doesn't seem real. Never showed any sign of that happening before. And I remember that football thing where something had happened there, and then I lost it because of the PTSD.
Right.
So, yeah, whatever. They all can't land perfectly. That's all. Every story. So.
And to kind of go back to what you was talking about before about Lucky Chances, I seen a clip of you the other night with he went on to play Dimitri on All My Children. Y'all was in there, Michael Nader.
Michael Nader.
Yeah, and Sandra Bullock, the Queen Sandra.
Sandra Bullock, absolutely. Yeah, she was my wife, and Michael Nader had her killed. Elizabeth Moss, you know who she is, right? Elizabeth Moss.
Yes.
She was our daughter, mine and Sandra Bullock's daughter. She was like 8 years old at the time.
Right.
So yeah, and I ran into her at a lingerie store, funny enough, in New Orleans.
Right.
And I walked up to her and I said, "I'm sure you don't remember this, but I played your father in Lucky Chances." And she was like, "Oh my gosh!" She said, "That was like the first TV role I had." And I was like, "Yo, you were a kid." And she was fantastic. She really was. She was great in the role. But she was mine and Sandra's daughter. Yeah. And Michael's wonderful. I love Michael and loved working with him on All My Children too. He's really a wonderful actor and a special man.
Yeah. You it was short and brief, but I remember watching you on 90210. Your character was Riggs, and you was kind of that guy. You had a knife to Jason Presley, and that was ironic there on that one.
I love that. It was a three show arc. of the character. I played Riggs the pimp, and I had a blast. Especially the last episode that I did, where my character was set up by one of my prostitutes. And I was busted for selling cocaine, I believe it was. But it was like the perfectly beautiful Hollywood afternoon, blue skies, and we're right off the Walk of Fame there, with the stars and everything, Hollywood Walk of Fame. And we're shooting, and I'm like, this is, as a young actor, I'm like, this is like a Hollywood experience, man. It's like I'm sitting there in the middle of the street, the police cars are whizzing around, and then I'm standing there with $100 bill in my hand going, what? And helicopters are flying, guys are like with guns out shooting. Like, this is freaking awesome, man. I had the best time in those scenes. It was really great. Getting to shoot in the middle of the heart of Hollywood like that. It was fun.
You still got some of them $100 bills with you? Because I could, you can screen
They're
that.
Always somebody always makes sure that they get him back. That's for sure.
I remember when I first saw you in that, you pulled out that knife, and I was like, oh, I'm telling Marge, I'm telling Bev, I'm telling you're this good guy, and now you're bad.
I know. He was a fun character. It was fun. It was interesting because that was a perfect example of one of those auditions where anything can happen. I actually went in for the audition to play a different role. And I went into the room, and Aaron Spelling was there, and it was about probably 12 people. It was like a room filled with people. And I read for Aaron with this other role. And he said, he goes, you know what? He goes, I think you'd be better for this other role, Riggs. Would you mind taking the sides and going outside and looking at them for a bit?
Right.
2 scenes. He said, just look at them for a bit and then come back in when you're ready. So I said, sure. And I went outside, and I would say that I'm grateful at least that at the time I had been auditioning a lot. So I felt really good and confident that I could get the scenes down quickly enough to go back into the room.
Right.
So I went back into the room with the 2 scenes, did them both really well. They said they loved it. Great. Left, went home, get a call from my agent shortly after. And they said, guess what? You got the other role, the one that you read for a second. And he said, the difference is the first role you read for was 1 episode, because this one is a 3-episode arc. And I'm like, oh, that's great. So I got to do that character, and it was a great character. And I was grateful that Aaron Spelling singled me out for that.
Yeah.
I had worked on Hotel also at some point. I don't remember if it was before or after. I think it was before. So I'd worked with him before. Yeah, he was great.
So then you went on to play Mr. David Hayward. I mean, you was on CBS, NBC, back on CBS. Now you're on ABC, and this is a channel that had GH, One Life, Ryan's Hope, and now Children. And you're on this show with Susan Lucci and David Canary. I mean, when my mother first got hooked on My Children, the first thing she said was, "Is that Candy from Bonanza?"
Yeah.
Acting with Lujack. You, him, and Michael E. Knight would have episodes where you 3 would fight or argue or something, especially when Dixie was involved. So, what is your memories when you first joined? Well, how did you get the part first?
I honestly, it was strange because it was only a 3-month job. It was like a summer gig. Oh, okay, not summer. It was actually after the summer. I was living in LA, and I was going back to New York for my daughter Aria's baptism with my family on Long Island.
Right.
And before we left, my manager, Doug Warner, he called me and he said, listen, there's a role, it's a 3-month job on All My Children that they're considering you for, but they would like to meet with you. Is there a chance that you can get to New York? And I said, well, I'm going to New York this weekend. I'll just stay an extra few days and go see them on Monday if they want.
Right.
And he said, that's great. So I went in and met with Judy Wilson and Jean Daddario Burke, was the executive producer at the time, Judy Wilson, casting director. And we just talked. We talked for about, 45 minutes. She talked about the character, talked about the medium itself, daytime, and, people we worked with. And at the end of it, they said, look, we'd love for you to do this role if you want it. It's yours. And I'm like, okay, it's 3 months. Sure, I'll make it work. I had friends living in New York, so I stayed at a friend of mine, my friend Eric's, on the Upper West Side. Well, they put me up for the first week, I think, when I came in. at a hotel, and then I went to stay with my friend.
Right.
And it turned into 14-year role. So that's what it was, and I'm grateful for that as well. I didn't expect it was going to be like that. When I first went on the show, I felt like it was the All My Children's summer fantasy camp. Get to work with everybody for 3 months and then say bye bye.
Right.
And I remember working with James Mitchell, seeing him, and Ruth Warwick. Yeah, it was amazing to me that I was working on the same show with Ruth Warwick, who was the last living member of the Mercury Theater.
Yeah.
That was with Orson Welles, and she was in the movie Citizen Kane.
Right.
So I was like, gee, I'm working with Ruth Warwick, and others as well. I mean Hurley and a bunch of people, and getting to work obviously with David Canary and working with Susan Lucci and the people on that show. David Canary, getting to work the scenes with both Adam and Stuart. The first time I did it, it was like working together for about 5 hours straight, because there was several shows we were doing at once.
Right.
And him doing both characters and me working with his double for the other character. It was like watching a master class, watching him. He was absolutely brilliant. And part of his brilliance also was that he was just the salt of the earth as a human being. He was just such a dear man, loving, generous, gracious man, and consummate professional. It was very sad to see him having that degenerative disease, Alzheimer's, when it happened, because he was never somebody that would go up on his lines, but he would be forgetting his lines, and he seemed confused. You could see that it was starting to develop in that way. And
I never knew that.
Yeah, and I remember speaking with his wife at the time, and she basically said to me, she said he can't even go out by himself anymore. And Maureen, it was really disturbing for her and for him, but he couldn't, because they lived in the same town in Weston, Connecticut for 30 years. And she got a phone call from one of the store owners that he was there, and he was confused. He didn't know where he was. And so that was like the last time that she allowed him to go in a car by himself to drive anywhere. He couldn't do it. It's such a horrible disease. And he, I loved David. I really did. I loved him. And he was just a very special man. Beautiful heart and person. Yeah.
And it's ironic that when the show ended in 2011, you brought Stewart back from the dead. They out of nowhere, you had some kind of way where you could bring people back all of a sudden. When the show was ending, they was like, is he bringing this character back? And then, because they killed off Stewart, I remember that. They thought it was Adam, and then you brought him back. And I'm like, so what kind of wonder drug does David have? Can he bring people back from the dead?
I think I even brought back Dixie too, I think.
Yes, you did.
Pancakes said she died. I wasn't on the show at the time when she died. I was on Young and the Restless.
Yeah.
So when I came back, she wasn't on the show again. But yeah, I brought back Dixie as well. Somebody reminded me of that recently on social media. Asked if I had anything to do with that. I said, well, I did think I did bring her back. So yeah, it was kind of crazy. I don't remember what the drug was that did this kind of thing, but it was good for the show. That's the hardest part about that show, All My Children, was that there was no closure, for the audience, for the characters. It was a crazy roller coaster towards the end of the show, and we were going to be canceled, ABC, and Lorraine Broderick was the head writer at the time, and they wrote a final episode, where it was going to have some closure, for the audience as well.
Right.
But then Prospect Park bought the licensing rights for it and wanted to do the online version for iTunes and for Hulu. And we were told at first, we're going to go right back into production like a week later. Then it was 2 weeks later, then it was a month later, it was like several months, and then it was like a year went by and we didn't do it. Then we finally came back, and we only did it for a few months, and then the show they got into a legal battle with ABC, and the show then went off again. And because of that, we were told in May that we were coming back but it wasn't until November, and it was like every couple of weeks they said, no, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. It was like we've been dragged through this process for all that time. And in fact, I was told I wasn't allowed to do certain jobs that I was being offered at the time because they said we're coming back.
Right.
It was such a drag. And then they said in November that it was like, no, we're not coming back. And so there was no closure. Just like the show ended. And it was a shame too, because Ginger Smith was the executive producer on that version of the show, and she did a fantastic job, a brilliant job.
Right.
The show looked amazing. The stories were fantastic. Yeah, I remember the quality of the show was wonderful. I mean, the writing was great. The look, it was digital. It was really great. Yeah. So it was disheartening to see that it just like faded out. After 40 plus years, that there was no closure. That was a shame.
Yeah, and I felt like, because I was like everybody else, I felt like it was going to come back. It was going to come back eventually, and then for it to like not come back because One Life did the same thing. It ended and went online with you guys, and
that's right.
Both shows ended with like a cliffhanger, as if y'all were going to come back, but ended up not coming back. And I was deeply shocked because I had a lot of hope in that, and it felt like it was going to work. And it's ironic that they had it looked like they was trying to do a love thing with you and Debbie Morgan, Angie, because she became your new friend who kind of had faith in Hayward. And then when y'all was online, I remember the episode when y'all was dancing. I think you kissed her, and I'm like, what are they doing with this here?
Yeah. I love Debbie. I do. She's as a person, she's just a beautiful, beautiful woman. And I loved working with her. She's incredibly talented, and everybody in the show. There was so many good people. I was at her wedding with Jeffrey, and it was just she's a beautiful person. So I didn't mind it at all. It was good for David to have at least one advocate in Pine Valley. Somebody that, saw beyond his nefarious deeds and saw what kind of person he was, and that he's had some goodness in him. So it was great to see that. I know Jesse wasn't too crazy about it. Darnell, he's another one. I love Darnell. I just love him, man. They're good, really good, solid people. And incredibly talented. And crazy. So
what was your reaction when you found out that? Because I know when the show ended on ABC, it was a party at the Chandler house. We heard a gunshot, but we don't know what happened. When you came back, they found out you was wrestling with JR. Was Jacob Young, but then the new actor came in, and Marissa, your daughter, got shot and died, and you went to jail. What was kind of your reaction when you found out you was kind of involved in that?
I got to be honest with you, Matt. I don't really remember that part of the story. I remember that. I remember that it was the whole thing, the gunshot. And that because they had those kind of like tunnels in the back running through the house, the Chandler house, and that's where I ran into JR, and he had the gun, and we struggled with it. I really don't remember the details of it, and I which is kind of strange because that wasn't as long ago as some of the stuff that I remember from 20 years ago. So, so I'm sorry, I can't really.
It's okay. But I guess from me bringing this up, I guess you probably know by now my memory of knowing soap operas at this point. I'm a huge fan of the medium. I got a clip here with you and Cameron Matheson from All My Children. I'm going to see if I can pull that up here. It was right before we thought you were dead.
Obsession. You are sick, and she deserves somebody so much better. Oh, you mean someone like you, right? No, I'm not talking about me. This is never about me. This is just about her getting the hell away from you. This is just about her getting the hell away from you. Do you understand? Away from you. Greenlee is mine. Greenlee will always be mine. Greenlee is mine. Greenlee will always be mine.
I'll tell you, man. Our fight coordinator at the time it was BH. I can't remember. he loved work on the show. My character was in so many fights on that show in the 14 years that I was on ABC. So many. And he used to come into work all the time and say, your character put my daughter through college. Because he was like the fight coordinator, and he goes, every week I'm like getting beat up by somebody. My face must have been made of titanium, actually, because he always did like a punch, like square in the face. And the next day it's just maybe a little bruised, It was fun though. It was great. I mean, and I loved it actually, because he also was the fight coordinator for the Metropolitan Opera. So he knew I loved opera, so he would give me tickets to go watch the rehearsals at Lincoln Center. We were right down the road. ABC, where we were shooting, was literally a block away from the Met.
Right.
So I would go to watch the rehearsals of, Pavarotti doing Tosca, or all these other performers. I'm sitting in the Met with like about maybe 20 other people and the director and the crew, and they're running through the opera, and I'm watching the whole thing, and it was because of him.
Right.
That he was giving me these passes whenever they were doing these rehearsals. It was very cool. Very cool.
So in the middle of Children, you went to Young and the Restless, and you played Mr. David Chow, another David, ironically. You just can't get enough of the name David, ironically.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. David Chow.
What was your memories of that character, that show, and working with, you worked close with Eric Braeden and Melody Thomas Scott?
Yeah. My memories of it was, first of all, confused with the name. And when they told me what my character's name was, I was like, Chow? You mean like CIAO, like Italian Chow? He said, no, CHOW. I was like, okay. So was I adopted by a Chinese family as a kid? How did this work? But the interesting thing is Lynn Marie Latham was the executive producer and head writer at the time. She was doing both, wearing both hats. She had me brought on. I had just left All My Children. And when she heard that I was off of All My Children, she wanted to work with me, she said, because she was actually one of the writers, I think it was. I believe she was a writer on a nighttime series in the early 90s called Homeward Bound. I think that's what it was called. It was about soldiers coming back from World War II and reassimilating back into their family lives and everything. And with flashbacks going back to the war and the whole thing. And she said that, because I met with her for dinner one night, and she said, I said, well, how did this come about that you brought me? And she goes, well, I always wanted to work with you. She said, you auditioned for that series. And she said, and you and a few other people stood out for me, and I wanted you for that role, and it didn't go my way. Sometimes, networks, everybody gets involved. It's a lot of people making a decision. So, but I had always wanted to work with you. And she said, and when I found out that you were available now, I thought, let's bring him on. So, and that was another one. It's supposed to be 3 months, and it turned into 2 years, that character.
Yeah.
But the reason why I was David Chow was because at the time, I'm trying to remember the story, but there was a woman that was killed in Genoa City that was on the show. I think her name was Marissa, or something like that. I can't remember, but something like that. Or Marina, something.
Yeah.
She was killed, and they were trying to find out who may have killed her. And the detectives had a list of names of people that she knew from her past. And one of the names that was on a index card on the board that they talked about was a past relationship she had with somebody in another town. And one of the writers at the time asked Lynn Marie if she could name him David Chow, because that was a friend of hers who had been in the business for many years. Apparently he was a stuntman who was dying of cancer. This is a real story. He was dying of cancer, and she wanted to memorialize him. And Lynn Marie said, absolutely, go ahead. Yeah, give him the name David Chow. So, but the character was never supposed to be on camera. It was supposed to just be a name that they mentioned as a possible suspect to the killing that from the town she lived in previously. But a couple weeks later go by, when Lynn finds out that I'm leaving All My Children, she says, I would love to work with him. And they said, what character can we bring him on as? And she said, why don't we bring on Marissa's boyfriend from the old town? He could play him, forgetting that the name was David Chow. She totally forgot that it was David Chow. She didn't know. And so they said, oh, okay. And nobody reminded her. Well, his name is David Chow. So they said, yes, that we do this. So they started developing the character like that immediately. And I get the call, first of all, I knew that was going on the show, and that they were going to be announcing it for publicity's sake, that I was coming on the show. And I said, oh, great. That's great. We're going to start doing this, because I was going to start working the next week. Right. She said, yeah, we're going to let people know. We're going to have, I think I had an interview with Michael Logan on TV Guide. And I said, well, what's my character's name? She said, David Chow. And that's when I said to him, you mean Chow? Like C-I-A-O? No, David Chow. I said, that's interesting. So that's how that came about. And it was great. I mean, I loved working the show. It was a weird time, though, because then the writer's strike happened soon after I started on the show. I've worked through 2 writer's strikes on daytime. One was on Santa Barbara. One was on that show, on Young and the Restless. It's always a weird time when that happens, because the shows stay on, but now you have scab writers. It's a little confusing, a little dicey, Right. But yeah, I mean, we as the performers, we have to show up to work. We can't not show up to work unless the show decides that they're not going to be airing. But they did, and I could say honestly that on Santa Barbara, during that segment of time, it was kind of some of the craziest material that I ever done. It was nuts. It was nuts. It really was.
I remember. I wanted to ask you 2 things about GL around that time. 'Cause I know around this time when you was on Young and the Restless, Guiding Light had been canceled after so many years on the air. I mean, so I know there was some rumors that they were supposed to ask you to come back as Lujack or as Nick around that time when you left All My Children. I was going to ask if you've been approached about that, and then kind of what was your reaction when you heard the show was ending after all them years?
Well, first of all, yes, there was some. I did have a meeting at the time after All My Children went off the air. I can't remember her name. She was an actress. She used to be on Another World, and she
Ellen Wheeler.
Ellen Wheeler.
Okay.
She called and I went and met with her on 57th Street, Manhattan, at the CBS broadcasting, with the possibility of coming back on the show. So we talked about it at the time, and she said, but if it happens, it won't be for a few months, because we've got story already written for a few months. And I said, okay, well, this is something just to consider. And when you're ready, let's talk more about it. But then it was right after that meeting. It was just like a couple of days later is when I got the call from Y&R and from Lynn Marie, and offering me to come on the show there. And I thought, well, this is 3 months, maybe in between I could be doing that. And it was just kind of funny that the week that I started taping on Young and the Restless, it was on the cover of a soap magazine, was that I was going back to Guiding Light.
Yep.
And so I was like, no, I'm not going back to Guiding Light. Nothing was said, but it was literally like a picture of me and saying that I was returning to Guiding Light, but I was already started with Young and the Restless.
I remember.
So that was kind of funny. That was interesting. And then when the show went off the air, it was probably like a year later, because I was out in Los Angeles. I actually, there's a famous bagels in New York. I think it's called H&H Bagels, I think it is. And I had a whole spread of bagels with lox and all cream cheese sent from them to the set one morning on Guiding Light, just to, as a gift to all of them, and thanking them for, for the years that I spent on the show. They were a wonderful crew. Right. So yeah, I did that. I was in Los Angeles at the time and arranged it so with the production staff on the show at the time, for them to be able to receive it, because they, for these shows you go into work at 7 o'clock in the morning, so it was a whole breakfast spread that was for the entire cast and crew that I had sent. And it was just my way of showing my appreciation for the show, for the people of the show, and for the fact that it was kind of transformative for me in my career. It was foundational for the next 30, 40 years working on that show. So I was very grateful. Yeah.
And then you went on to play Mr. with the interesting name. I couldn't pronounce it at first. Deimos Kyriakis.
Deimos Kyriakis.
Yes. You worked with Mr. John Ashton, and you was with Nicole, and you was just this whole nother dynamic. And he was back on NBC, and now you're Mr. Deimos. Talk about that.
Yeah, I love the character. Again, it was interesting because the character, whenever you have a character like Lujack or with David Damos, I put in that category too, where you have excellent backstory, where you really can understand who the character is and why they are the way they are.
Right.
And that's what they did. Josh Griffith was the head writer at the time.
Right.
And he created the character, and it was just fantastic. And I loved working with him because it was interesting. The strange thing about working on Days at the time, I don't know, it's probably changed now since COVID, because I know that a lot of the shows weren't able to tape for months and months. Days of Our Lives was there. They were like 6 months ahead of schedule in taping.
Right.
So it was strange that when I came on the show, I couldn't let anybody know publicly. We couldn't let the media couldn't know. I couldn't say anything on social media about it for 5.5, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it was strange. I mean, but also for the head writer, it's strange too, because typically it's like a month, about 3 weeks to a month, you're ahead of schedule. So if something's not working, you can correct it within a short period of time, right. As a writer. So Josh would actually come and stand off camera during our scenes to watch how things were playing, and then develop from that, because he needed to see it. And he loved what we were doing with it, so he kept developing the characters more and the relationships more based on what he was watching. So, and it was very smart of him to do that, because like I said, there was no lag time, and it was like, 6 months, something's not working. What do? You don't know until you see it and the audience sees it. So, but I loved the character. It was fantastic. And I loved working with John and with everybody. It was a great cast. And I was sorry to see the character go, because he was a very special character. Yeah.
I actually remember the funniest thing about you as Damos was, I don't know if you remember this. There was an episode or scene where it was a party, and you kind of drugged this champagne bottle, and then you had disguise of all gray, like you was trying to fade where nobody knew that you was around, and that was the interesting, funniest moment there when it happened.
That was towards the end. Yeah, it was towards the end of the character. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember it specifically in detail, but I do remember vaguely that there was something that I was drugging people.
Yeah.
So similar to Dr. David Hayward with Libido Zone, I guess, on some level.
So, You poured a whole bottle of stuff in the punch bowl at a party as Hayward on Children.
Yeah, it was a flask. It was a flask that I had, and if a waiter walked by, hit my elbow, and the flask fell into the punch bowl. So that's where it all went in, and I had to fish it out, but it all poured out into the punch bowl. So the entire yacht filled with Pine Valley residents ingested the Libido Zone, and it set storylines off for like months and months after that. It was kind of funny, actually. I loved it. It was a fun storyline. It was crazy.
So how did it feel to win your first daytime Emmy in 2009? When you had just came back to All My Children?
Yeah, it was great. It's interesting. Chuck Pratt was the head writer at the time, and he's the one. I literally just finished my last day of work on Young and the Restless when I got a phone call from Chuck, and saying he was head writing over there at All My Children. He had written for me on Santa Barbara years earlier, also with Josh Griffiths, who created Damos.
Right.
And Josh was also a writer on Young and the Restless when I was on there as David Chow. But he contacted me the day of and left a message on my voicemail saying, I've heard that you're leaving Young and the Restless. I want you to come back to All My Children. And he said, I've got this great story. And he literally said, let me help you win an Emmy. So I called him back. We talked, and I said, I'm going to be back in New York next week. Let's have a meeting. So we did. I went to the ABC and had a meeting with him in his office, and he told me the story he had, and I loved it. It sounded like a great story. So I said, all right, let's do this. And and it was. I loved the story. It gave me an opportunity to really show a lot of levels emotionally, and yeah, then all of a sudden it was like 6 months later, I'm standing there with an Emmy in my hand, and it was like, it was rather prescient of him that he was able to see that could be the possibility, and I was very grateful, and I thanked him from the stage, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he did a fantastic job with it. It was great.
You briefly had a reunion with Torsten. You did a stunt on Bold and the Beautiful, Dr. George Armstrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, man, I think Torsten, he's doing such a fantastic job on that show. He really is. And it was great. I mean, I did 10 episodes as a doctor, another doctor. And yeah, it was great. I loved it. I loved playing the character. I loved working on the show. And it just, again, it's like that same thing that I keep revisiting, that it is like one big repertory company. I can't tell you how many people in that crew and in the cast that I've known all these years and worked with in other capacities. Tony Pasquarelli was the director on the show, the first one that I did, and he was on All My Children for years. He was working as a director and as an editor on that show. He was also over there for a while. I believe he was over at Young and the Restless too when I was on there.
Right.
But there was so many people. It was like, everybody. So it's always a very welcoming atmosphere, when you go on these shows.
Yeah.
It's different than working as a guest star on a nighttime show. Every show is different, but sometimes when you come on as a guest star on a nighttime show, the people that work together every day, they are very cliquish. They know each other really well. You're kind of the outsider, know. But some of them are very welcoming too, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just like you're there to do your job and that's it. And then you go on and it's like the next week it's going to be a whole new cast with the current cast. But that's not the same. On daytime, it's because everybody doesn't know each other. You've worked for so many years with others that it is a very welcoming environment. And that's how I felt when I was on B&B. It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
So.
You've had quite a journey, Vincent. You've been on daytime, primetime plays. You even did an episode of Homeland as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, do that. Yeah, that was fun. It was great. I love the show. It was a great show to be on. So.
How could you sum up your career? I mean, you've had quite an amazing journey all these years.
I don't know. I mean, it's been like 40 plus years, and kind of feel like I'm a journeyman in that regard. I guess you can ask about how you sum up a journey. I do feel that way to some degree. I've been very fortunate to have worked with some wonderful people on camera as well as people behind the camera. So I'm very grateful. Yeah, I feel very blessed in many ways to have had the opportunity to do what I've done all these years.
Yeah.
So so I feel very grateful for that. So.
What kind of music do you listen to?
I go through different stages, and I just started listening to more country again. I love the stories that they tell. They're great. I love them because of the lyrics. The lyrics are always so catchy, and they just heartfelt, and you get a real image of what they're telling in the story. Yeah. So I just started doing that again recently because I've been driving a lot, and I put that on, and it's kind of feel good music. I listen to all different kinds of music. There are periods that I go through like a classical phase, or I go through, jazz, but it depends. But right now I'm into country music, I guess. So,
yeah.
A New Yorker into country music. That's all.
So now you're into
real estate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a realtor with a company out here called Pinnacle Estate Properties. Been with them for years.
Okay.
And I've also, I've had the opportunity to sell homes outside of California as a referring agent. People have contacted me and let me know that they were looking to sell their house, and I set them up with a top agent in whatever community. I sold a house recently in Naples, Florida. That was my second one in Naples, Florida that I sold with an agent there that I worked with. So I'm able to advertise it in social media. And I sold one in Virginia a few years ago. So I do that as well, but I'm based out of Los Angeles is where I am, and that's where I do most of my work. So,
okay.
Yeah. Keeping busy while I'm not busy doing other things. I do have, I can't mention the name right now, but I do have a Western that I did recently. They've asked us not to advertise it yet, but I was just given a tentative air date of April 25th of the episode that I did, but that's tentative, so it's not definite. But I'm pretty certain that over the next few weeks I'll be able to start announcing that. But it was my first Western, and I loved it. I had a great time doing it. It was kind of when they came back after the shutdown production. It was early on. I think it was probably like September or October of last year. And because of that, I wasn't able to cut my hair for like 7 months because of COVID. Couldn't get it, you know. So I definitely had the look. I had the look for a Western at the time. And it was kind of perfect because I did say that to someone. I said, I feel like I could do a Western now. It was like 3 weeks later. My first audition was for a Western, and I got the part because I had the beard, I had the hair, I had everything. So it looked great. I just saw the episode just recently because I went in to do some audio for it and watched the whole episode, and it looked great. I was really happy with it. So I'm excited to see it.
You know, with this long hair now you can go back to playing Lujack or Nick, you know, because you had long hair when you played those characters.
Yeah, a little long in the tooth, though, for Lujack or Nick. But, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Lujack, he's not coming back. But
no.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that, you know, with soaps like that back then, you know, it's like when you died, you was gone. Lujack was gone. Hayward died and came back from the dead, and he brought characters back from the dead. Is like soaps kind of changed.
But David didn't really die. He staged his own death.
That's true.
He staged it. He did it, I think, to get back at Greenlee or something, and to get back at some other characters I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, he didn't really die though. That was a strange time for me at the time because I was entering into a new contract on all my children, and they talked to me about this, that they wanted me to go off camera for 3 months. I was going to stage my own death and then bring me back, but they needed to keep it quiet. They wanted to give the appearance that I really did die in the show.
Right.
So it was a weird time because the audience thought that I really died, and I knew that wasn't the case. And even when I came back to do the show 3 months later, my new contract was actually with a different name. It was an alias, but then I had a rider that alias was me to prove that this was my new contract. Right. Because they didn't want people at ABC to leak it out. It was strange. It was such a strange thing. And when I first came back to start working on the show again, the scripts that I was getting with the character's name was Sawyer. Similar to the character on Lost was Sawyer, if you remember correctly. So my character, the way on the script, the name was Sawyer. It wasn't David. So until my show started airing, the characters that in the script was Sawyer, and it was just they were doing everything they could to keep from the audience or leaking out that my character was actually alive.
Right.
But we had to carry that on for another few weeks. It was probably like another 3 weeks after I started filming. For the show to air that I wasn't really dead, and I walked into the courtroom alive. It was like bizarre. So it was a strange time to have to do that. I was like, this is really weird, man. But, it was Julie Carruthers was the executive producer at the time, but that's what we were doing. So yeah.
Was that interesting to work with Michelle twice? I mean, she was Michelle on Guiding Light, and you was Nick, and then on All My Children, she was Greenlee, and then you was David. Y'all was a couple on there, and then on Guiding Light, she was the young teenage Michelle, and you was Nick. Was that interesting to work with her twice?
I'm going to be really straight with you. I don't remember on Guiding Light having had the opportunity to work with Greenlee, with Rebecca on there on Guiding Light. That's when I was Nick.
Yeah. She came in 95. She was the aged up Michelle. Because I know Michelle was a kid when you came on. They aged her up with Rebecca, and she stayed on for 3 years prior to you leaving before coming to All My Children.
Well, if it was 95, I probably wasn't. I was on the show much longer when she came on, I guess. I'm just. You're reminding me something that I don't really remember, and I don't remember that we probably didn't work that much together at the time. I think I would think. I don't know, but it's like funny because again, that same thing. This very large ensemble. I worked with actors on Santa Barbara that years later I was working on all my children. You know, Eva LaRue was on Santa Barbara at one point. John Callahan was on Santa Barbara when I was on there. Yeah, there's several people. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Vincent, what can we look forward to you doing this year? I mean, any plans? I mean, other than like everybody else trying to get through this COVID season. I mean, you got anything acting or with what you're doing now?
Well, like I said, I definitely have that Western coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like the business is starting to gear up again. The daytime's been working, but other productions have slowed down, and now they're starting to get back out there again. I just started auditioning again. I've done a few local commercials that I've done, and I look forward to seeing one of them. I think it could be really good. It was a great crew. The director was awesome. So I'm supposed to be getting a copy of that too. So yeah, just keeping myself active, doing everything I can, keep my, hone my skills and keep sharp. So that's basically it right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing the Western when it comes out, and hopefully get some other roles come in. So
one role I
like
can see you playing. One thing I can see you playing, though, that you haven't played because you play a lot of doctors. You could play a character where he could be running for mayor or senate and got a lot of history, dirty trash on him because he's running for mayor. I could see you doing that.
That's true. I could do that. I'd love to play a lawyer sometime. I've never had the opportunity to play a lawyer. That would be great.
Yeah.
Even a detective or somebody like that, somebody in law enforcement. I would love that too.
Yeah.
So, that's the fun thing about being an actor, man. You get to put on the clothes of another character all the time. The skin of another character and breathe life into it.
Yeah. So, well, I've admired a lot of your work over the years.
Thank you, man.
I was born in '91, so I didn't see a lot of your work as Lujack. But from what I've seen, you did a fantastic job. I love you as
1991.
I was born in '91. I'll be 30 in July this year. So
Wow. Well, happy pre-birthday to you.
Thank you. You also worked good with Rick Hurst when he was Alan Michael on the show. Y'all had a lot of
Rick Hurst. Yes,
and
he's awesome.
Yeah, and
people don't know this about Rick, but he's actually a black belt in karate. He can get pretty intense physically, but he's great. He's a wonderful actor. Yeah, I love working with Rick. Yeah, it was great. I mean, my first time meeting Rick was at the Emmys, the year that they brought me on as Nick. The first time I got to meet the cast was they had me presenting at the Emmys that year, and that was me introducing to the audience that I was coming on Guiding Light.
Right.
And that's when I sat with Rick, with him and his wife at a table with them, and that's when I first met him. And he was just a sweetheart, good guy. So it was great working with him. Yeah.
And before I let you go, I wanted to ask you: are you still in touch with the woman that played Darcy, Holly Johnston? She was one of the Gallagher's with you.
Robin Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robin Johnson. No, I haven't seen Robin in probably 30 years. It's been a long time. No. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people that worked on the show. Ramon Franco was on the show, was in the Galahads at the time. I forgot what his character's name was.
There was one character on there named IQ. I remember that much. It was IQ. Yeah.
It was Ace was one of them. IQ was another one. I forgot what Ramon, but Ramon and I worked together on the Clint Eastwood movie, Heartbreak Ridge. He was on there. We both were in the ensemble cast of that together. So it was cool. And he and I had a wild night in Tijuana. We had a crazy night. We could barely walk over the border to come back home. I drank a lot of mezcal that night. But it was very fun. We had a good, and we didn't drive. We had somebody who came to meet us, by the way.
That's a good thing.
So, we didn't drive, but we literally were very hungover the next day, laying on the beach in Laguna, and just was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we survived that night. So, but we were working on a film together with Clint Eastwood, working at a Camp Pendleton, so it was pretty cool.
Do you plan on writing a book about your life or getting into music?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I've certainly I've written some things that have been published in some magazines of periods of my life, and I've been told by others, encouraged by others to do that because I've had a pretty crazy life in a lot of ways that people don't even realize.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, sometimes I do think about doing that, of writing, but I also like writing music occasionally, and lyrics. It's kind of why I'm listening to more country right now, because like I said, I love the lyrics.
See,
It's really good. So I'm kind of getting inspired to do something with that again. So,
you can be nominated for country singer of the year.
you're
Or,
right, country. Maybe as a writer for other
yeah,
people, but we'll see. I don't know. So,
yeah. Well,
well,
Vincent, I'm going to play this promo for you one more time. I know earlier you couldn't hear it well, and then I'm gonna let you go. This is when you
okay,
was Nick.
okay. Gotta put my.
Imagine you're Nick McHenry. One woman has stolen your heart. Another is out to steal your identity. They both want to claim you any way they can. But to belong to one means denying another. What would you do? What will he do? Guiding light.
Try me.
Weekdays.
Try me. Try me.
Try me.
Yeah.
That was an interesting
Oh, my
promo
God,
y'all
that's
had back then. Everybody was like, "Try me, try me," and Clarence
Yeah,
was
really.
narrating it.
That's right.
Well, Vince,
Right,
yeah, he was a popular guy narrating all the soaps back then. Yeah,
that's true.
but
That's
Vince,
true.
I've had fun talking with you today. I enjoyed your company
Thank you,
as
man.
usual. And hopefully, eventually, I can have you come back and we can talk some more. And
Sure.
yeah, just stay safe,
Well, thank
be
you.
cool, and
Thank you for having me,
yeah,
man. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Whoever was out there, I don't see you, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's pretty awesome that fans from Daytime are as loyal as they are, and we're also very grateful for that. So thank you. All right, Matt. You take care of yourself. It was a pleasure, man. Later.
see you, man.
Blessings.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I got to figure out how to turn myself off here.
Okay. And all right, fans, thank you for watching. This was a really good new way to start my new show, Slick, A Better You. This is my second show. Anybody who's a Disney fan, you can join me in a few, like in 30 minutes or so. I got a Disney vet coming on, Gary Twansdale, who worked on Beauty and the Beast. And thank you for been watching my channel on Soaps Past. I will upload more Guy Light episodes, anything else I have on DVD. And yes, I see some people were shocked to see that. Yes, I was born in '91. That was the year Vince came back to the show, and I got hooked on soaps in 2000. And as a result of that, I've been writing and doing things for years. I'm trying to find a way to get into writing and maybe doing something in the medium, slowly but surely. And the Guy Light documentary I mentioned back in December or November of last year, that's on the way of being put out. So stay tuned for that. I will, it's going to be like a part 1 and part 2 because the movie is kind of long, but that's to come. And again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for coming on board, the fans, Calvin, Allison, Kelly, Karen, Kimberly, Debbie. You guys a lot of you guys have been a fan of my show for the last 2 years, and I appreciate that. It really touches my heart, and I'm thankful for that. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next guest. See you guys.